Today we're going to be discussing The Essentials of Human Communications by Joseph I. DeVito in regards to culture, gender, and nonverbal communications. Ongoing researches are still being performed on the impact of culture and gender differences. Based on this research as per Howe, 1998, Bergen, and Hubler, 2002, women are better senders and receivers than men when it comes to nonverbal messages. For example, studies of sender of nonverbal signals prove that 71% of women were superior to men. Similar studies were performed in regards to decoding, again, surpassed men by 84% on the 61 studies. Gesturing thumbs up will be rude. The thumbs up in Middle Eastern countries, Iran, Iraq, and Thailand, is an extremely obscene gesture, equivalent to flipping the finger in Europe. The use of thumbs up signs can still be easily misinterpreted in today's world. In Russia, the Middle East, and South America, thumbs up is seen as a very rude insult. Similar to Western V sign, this has caused several problems in Iraq, where American soldiers cannot be sure whether locals are welcoming them or are ready to blow them up. The following gesture is perceived by many cultures as disrespectful, especially when viewed from other countries, and specifically when our president does it. And there are several pictures and videos that are shown, and when the president has his legs crossed on top of the table, or furthermore, when the president is actually with a leg, which I'm not going to do, on top of the table. That is very extremely disrespectful to show the sole of your feet to anyone, at least in many cultures. Expressions and eye movements. We Americans freely show signs of emotions. We were brought up more openly, and our parents encourage us to show and not hide feelings. Even the males are taught that crying is not a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it is brave to show feelings. However, Scandinavians, on the other hand, hardly show any signs of emotion. For them, conveying emotions is a sign of weakness. Most of the Latin countries, such as Spain, France, and Germany, tend to be similar to that in the United States. It is considered proper and polite, with some exceptions. In the U.S., we are told by our parents, teachers, and close family members to look at the person you are talking to straight in the eye. It is perceived that you're hiding something or lying if you do not look at the opposite party when engaged in a bilateral conversation. In the Asian cultures, such as Japan, it means the total opposite. It stands for lack of respect, and prolonged eye contact is perceived as very offensive. Women tend to look at each other more than men, looking for acceptance, bonding, affiliation, whereas men, when interacting with other men, tend to look elsewhere, away. Yellow. Yellow in many countries throughout the world stands for femininity. In Egypt, it stands for happiness and prosperity. In the U.S., it stimulates the activities, the mental activity. It inspires, helps us focus, recall information, and also stand for caution. Proceed with caution. Blue. In ancient Rome, public servants wore blue. Today, police and other public servants wear blue. Blue for Egyptian means virtue and truth. In Iran, stands for something negative. In the U.S., stands for love. Signifies in many Muslim and Hindu cultures purity and peace. In Cuba too. However, in Japan and other Asian countries, it signifies the opposite, death and mourning. Here, black signifies death, In Thailand, old age, and in Malaysia, courage. In Egypt, green reflects and means fertility and strength. In Japan, youth and energy. In the US, stands for money, go, and nation. And countries like where I came from, it stands for faith, nature, and money as well. Colors. Colors have different meaning in different parts of the world that might be positive or negative depending on the occasion and on the country. For example, to be brief, in China, color means festive, joyous, prosperity, rebirth. I remember many years ago listening and hearing to how Cubans were loud because they liked colors such as red. Well, red for many Cubans stands for happiness, love, being content. But for others it might be perceived as loud, like for instance in the United States. Silence. You may have heard someone say, it's not what he or she said, it's the way he or she said it. Paralanguage. Sound shows the opposite from words themselves. For example, you might have said to someone, have a great day. Have a great day. Yet, the tone of your words reveal that it meant anything but to have a great day. Nonverbal elements held to a minimum are considered silence. When this technique of remaining silent is used effectively, it can encourage feedback. Language and silence. Apache women are explicitly taught to remain silent for days when working with strangers so that they can observe and evaluate each other. When Apache women date only after a few months of dating, it's when they engage in lengthy conversations. This is attributed to shyness and self-consciousness. Judge someone because they are late to a meeting or do not want to get off a topic by stating that they are disrespectful, disorganized, boring, or rigid. Try to avoid assuming that it's personal or a personality or character issue. Instead, put yourself in their situations, in their shoes, better known as apathy, and understand it's a difference in culture upbringing, which does not mean it's better than or less than your instilled notions of time value. For example, the first day of class, I had gone to the bookstore. The man went out of his way to try to help me with a book. I told him I only have 10 minutes to get to class. The man did everything possible to try to get me a book. I kept telling him I can't be late. But given the fact that he's from a Latin culture, and specifically he happened to have been Colombian, there's no such thing as by, thank you, no. It goes on and on and on. And in as much as I hurried to get off, away and out of that bookstore on time, I was not able to make it to class on the dot. I had made it to class a few minutes later. So that was disrespectful to the teacher, but again, I was not disrespectful to the other gentleman. So it depends how you see it. I mean, of course, you don't want to be disrespectful to anybody, but you don't want to just end the conversation abrupt, because I can also be very disrespectful to other cultures, especially Latin culture and specifically the Colombian cultures. Time orientation. Many Asian cultures such as China and Japan place great emphasis on the past, unlike Native Americans and Latinos, place more value on the future. The importance that this is placed on time varies from one culture to another. These time orientations are instilled at a very young age and thereby made part of our attitude. Monochronism and polychronism. Monochronic time persons and cultures schedule one thing at a time. United States, Germany, Scandinavia, and Switzerland are and have a monochronomic culture. Latin America, the Mediterranean, and the Arab world are the opposite. They schedule several things at the same time. Polychronism. No culture is entirely one or the other. Some cultures combine both orientations. Special clocks. In my opinion, they're called time indicator. That's just my personal opinion. All cultures maintain a social clock, a time to start dating, start and finish college, buy your first home, have children, so on and so forth. This is our culture indicator that we are keeping up with our peers, we are ahead or behind them. If we have kept up with the rest of our colleagues, then we are competent and part of the group, subsequently being well adjusted and thus feeling appropriate. If we're not, then we're not competitive, we're not well adjusted based on our cultural time frame for accomplishing individual social tasks, social goals. The social clock has become more flexible and accepting. However, the pressures to keep up with those activities based on our age and peers still exist. And encoding represents a real challenge, taking into consideration all that must be analyzed, thereby taking several precautions prior to sending and or interpreting the message will result in a more effective communication. Conclusion. Based on everything that we have gone through, it boils down to do not jump into conclusions, do not jump the gun, so to speak.